Hey, what's up everyone? It's me, Jose Carlos, aka The Orchid Geek, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we are going to be discussing something that we should all be experiencing in one way or another, and that is winter. The climate has shifted, and we need to become aware of the changes that are occurring around us in order to protect our orchids from the many dangers of the autumn and winter months. Now, during autumn and winter, there are many environmental changes that begin to take place, and one of those changes is that the days become shorter and shorter. And while the Christmas tree went up, the temperature dropped like the ball in Times Square on New Year's Eve. So all around the world, people are dealing with winter in one way or another, and not only does winter bring lower temperatures, but many times it also brings rain and snow, which might cause some of us to bring our orchids inside of our homes or turn the heaters in our greenhouses and homes on as well, just to keep them all warm and safe. Due to these changes, we as orchid growers must gain a higher sense of awareness, almost like an orchid sense if you will, in order to fulfill our orchids' needs during this time. And our plants will notice changes themselves as they reduce their photosynthesis during the winter due to the shorter days and the reduced light. Now, orchid growers, this is our cue. For windowsill and indoor growers, it is recommended to move plants into areas where light is present and easily available. And according to the American Orchid Society, it is recommended that you place your orchid on a south-facing window as it may be, quote, brighter due to bare trees and the sun being lower in the sky, end quote. You're also going to want to make sure that your orchid gets a proper amount of sunlight without damaging the plant itself. Be sure to also provide some good airflow for your orchid. Good airflow never hurts, and it's extremely beneficial during the winter months, especially during cold snaps when you have recently watered and perhaps your plants are not drying quite as fast. Orchids hate stagnant air, and when combined with moisture, it really creates a nasty environment for your orchid. Now, there's going to be more on that later on in this episode, so keep tuned to learn some more. And by the way, guys, everything that I'm talking about also applies to patio and greenhouse growers alike, but under different circumstances. For those patio growers that live in areas where you might be fortunate enough to grow orchids outside, you might need to protect them from unexpected cold snaps, frost, and continuous rainfall, like in California, for example. And if at any moment you notice the weather is going to be unforgiving, bring your orchids inside where it's warmer, or cover your growing area and plants to protect them from the harsh conditions of the outside world. Now, this is also the time that you should be providing your orchids with more light, and you can do so by moving them to a slightly more exposed area in your patio with higher indirect sunlight, as this will be beneficial for the plant itself, and it will help the orchid become strong and ready for the springtime. For you greenhouse growers out there, you will need to adjust your lighting conditions as well, and there may be less light penetrating your greenhouse right now, especially if you have previously put up shade cloth during the bright and hot summer days. Now, you're going to want to remove your shade cloth, allowing for more light to reach your orchids. And also, if you have a heater, be sure that it's working properly and have it on during cold days where the temperatures drop significantly. If you don't have a heater, a small one from the Home Depot should work just fine for most small greenhouses. But otherwise, you can try and stick it out for the winter, but just be aware of the casualties that may and will occur if the temperatures drop below what your plants can tolerate. Now, if you're living in extremely cold areas, you might even need to insulate your greenhouse by using bubble wrap in order to keep the cold temperatures out and the warm temperatures in. But wait, there is more. Another main factor we need to keep our orchid senses ready for deals with something one of my mentors brought to my attention. Orchids don't like cold feet, like period. But what does that mean? Well, orchids don't like wet and cold roots, and this is something that can occur if we're not careful of our watering regimen during the winter months. Watering too late in the day may allow for water to stay on top of the orchid's roots, leaves, sheaths, and also flowers. And remember, moisture, cold, and stagnant air are not a good mix for your orchids at all. When combined, these factors may result in a nasty and even deadly surprise for your orchid's bulbs, sheaths, flowers, and even inside of the pot. It is very nasty, you guys. Now, a large number of home and greenhouse grown orchids are epiphytes, meaning that they grow on the sides of trees or in the wild, and they like to dry out in between waterings as well as get good airflow. For us orchid growers, that typically means having fans in our growing areas or cracking a window every now and then, as well as watering once every 7 days. Now for me, that's how long it takes for my orchids to dry out in their pot during the winter and summer. However, that is not the case during the autumn and winter months, where I often find myself typically watering once every 10 to 14 days, depending on how fast they dry out. With their shorter days and less light, plants will take a little bit longer to dry out in between each watering, and if we're not careful, we can overwater. And overwatering can cause damage to the plant's root system by causing rot, fungi, and sometimes even mold that smells very, very gross. Additionally, the combination of an overly moist root system along with the cold temperatures and stagnant air can cause your orchids to develop black rot, a condition that causes the roots, rhizomes, and bulbs to turn from their normal color to a nightmarish black. And this rot can spread from the roots of the orchid all the way throughout the plant, ultimately causing its demise. Black rot is a very common cause of death among orchids during the winter time, and it can kill an orchid swiftly and efficiently. We orchid growers can help prevent deadly situations like this during the winter if we simply use our orchid senses. You want to also try to avoid watering over the top of your orchid, as water may become trapped and lodged inside the crown or sheath of the plant. Now, this factor combined with the usual suspects of cold temperatures and stagnant air will also cause crown rot in Phalaenopsis, and it may also cause bud blast in young Cattleya flowers that have not emerged from their sheaths yet. Let's take a moment of silence for all the orchids we may have lost in the winter months present and past. Now, enough of the negativity, you guys. Let's go ahead and look at some fantastic ways that we can prevent any casualties from cold feet, and that is by ensuring that all of our orchids fully dry out in between watering, and also that we provide good air circulation to them as well. Now, as we have discussed, nothing is worse than the usual suspects of stagnant air combined with cold and wet conditions. Good airflow is beneficial to all orchids, especially in the winter, as it helps reduce the risks of rot and fungus. Now, in terms of your watering regimen, it will be ideal for you to water your orchids early in the morning, as watering in the morning will allow the orchids to dry out a little bit more throughout the day. And on the contrary, I would actually recommend to avoid watering late in the afternoon and evening. Don't be a savage, you guys. Have a heart, and please don't let your orchids suffer once night falls due to water on the leaves, roots, and the flowers. Now, this brings me to my next topic, which involves flowers, something that we all love and cherish deeply. When you water your orchids, you should always avoid watering the flowers, as it is possible for them to get botrytis, a nasty fungus that causes some very nasty looking brown spots on the petals, sepals, and lips of your orchid flower. Now, for you orchid growers who live in areas that lack humidity during the winter, you might find your plants are actually drying out rather quickly. Thus, you are having to water more often, which is completely normal. If this sounds like you, keep your eyes on your orchids, because they might need to be watered more regularly and might also need some additional humidity. Humidity trays and humidifiers may help with this issue as well. When it comes down to fertilizing your orchids, you won't be fertilizing quite as often. Less watering during the autumn and winter will result in reduced fertilizing overall. In some cases, over-fertilizing may cause poor root growth as well. So, during the winter, you want to become aware of the environmental changes that begin to occur in your location and adjust your growing areas accordingly. Always remember that not everyone's growing conditions are the same, and it is important for us to use our orchid senses to recognize the changes that occur during the autumn and winter months in our own locations. I hope that this video helps some of you guys gain some insight on how to care for your orchids during the changing of the autumn and winter seasons. Now, here's one more tip for my fellow orchid geeks. By joining a local orchid society, it can be a great source for all of you, as you will be connected with other orchid enthusiasts that will be more than happy to help you adjust during the changes that occur in your area during the winter. So, what are your guys' growing conditions like in the winter? Feel free to sound off in the comment section down below. I'd really love to hear how you guys adapt your growing during the winter, and also feel free to share any additional tips that help you during this time. As always, if you guys enjoyed the video, feel free to hit that like button, share this video to all your friends, and subscribe to my channel to become an orchid geek too. Remember to stay aware this winter, use your orchid senses, and I'll catch you guys on my next video. But until then, peace.